Good day, everyone, and welcome to this third IOSH Employability webinar. Today's webinar focuses on the important employment stage of CV writings, specifically for occupational safety and health roles. My name is Melissa Mark Joyce, and I'm a current IOSH Council member, and most recently was the chair of the IOSH Chiltern branch. With me today for this session is Laura Orcutt, who'll be coming on screen. Laura is the Associate Director for HSC Recruitment and is also a member of the IOSH Nominations Committee. Also joining us today would be Charlotte Langley, a member of the IOSH Education team. So Laura and Charlotte.
Hi, Melissa.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Yeah. So, really nice to be joining you all today. And we're going to be going through some CV tips and tricks for hopefully is going to help you, in your job hunt. Charlotte, I'm just checking. Have I got control of the screen now?
Sorry, go on, Melissa.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry. So Laura, thanks. I was just going to finish it off by saying that we will be hearing from yourself about, as you said, CV writing and also from Charlotte on some IOSH specifics. There will be a Q&A session at the end. So do type in your questions using the QA function, and Charlotte will help facilitate that Q&A answer session at the end. Any questions that we don't get to at the end will be responded via email after the session. Ooh, sorry. My keyboard. Okay, great. Sorry about that. So who's IOSH? I think most of you all on the call may be already familiar with IOSH. It is the largest global international group for OSH professionals with over 49,000 members. It's a non-for-profit professional body, and its mission is to be a leading voice in global occupational safety and health. And IOSH's mission, in addition, is to support us in every step of our career journey. Okay, so now I'll hand over to Laura, who's going to walk us through some tips for CV writing for jobs in occupational safety and health. So over to you, Laura.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Melissa. Just trying to make sure that I've got access to the slides now. Apologies, I can't seem to see them anymore, Charlotte. Ah, perfect. There we go. Lovely. Yeah. So as Melissa mentioned, I'm a director for HSC Recruitment. So what we do is health, safety, environmental recruitment. That's the day job. So we see a lot of health and safety CVs. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some good tips for what a really good CV should look like over the next sort of 20 minutes or so. So first off, I just wanted to cover, I guess, what a good CV should include in terms of general content. We're going to go into these details, in more detail over the course of the session. But there are some things that just have to be on a CV for us to understand who you are, to understand, what you do, what your background is. Starting off with your name and your contact details. It sounds daft, but it is so easy to forget those contact details. And we have this a lot. People will apply for different roles and will send us CVs across, and there's no way for us to get in touch with them, no email, no phone number. So that's absolutely number one. Make sure your name and your contact details are on there. They're really clear. They're really easy for us to find. So we recommend putting them right at the top of the CV, or you can do them as a header or a footer so that they're on every single page. But yeah, have to be really clear, really easy for people to find on there. And then in terms of the content, we always advise that you start off with a personal statement. And a personal statement is, just giving us a bit of info about you, who you are, what you're passionate about. And included in that personal statement maybe a summary of kind of your key skills, you know, the things that you're really, really proud of, the things that you think are your strengths. And I ideally say to put that right at the front of the CV. So it's the very first thing that people see. You know, so if you think about a CV as a snapshot of who you are as a person, and you've got a really, really short period of time to kind of grab someone's attention, the key stuff really needs to be in that personal statement at the top of the page. So whether that's, you know, how much experience you have, or what sort of qualifications you have, or what you're interested in doing, what you're passionate about doing, that should be right there. So we see it the second that we open the CV. We also need your education history. Again, we'll go into this in a bit more detail further on, but we definitely need to know, in terms of qualifications, the things that are relevant to the roles that you're applying for. And again, we'll give you some tips on this. Your employment history. So we want to see very, very clearly what job you did and who you worked for. So I know a lot of people, they sometimes shy away from putting company names on there. That's just that's making things difficult for yourself. You know, we really need to know what the company was, what they do, and what your role was within it. And again, we'll go through kind of the employment history in a bit more detail in a bit. And then the final bit we get asked about whether it should be on a CV or not is the hobbies and interests section. You know, they're not 100% necessary. You're not going to not get a role because you didn't include your hobbies or your interests on the CV, but they can really show your personality, and sometimes that's helpful. You know, people buy from people at the end of the day, and when you are applying for a job with a company, they're looking for people that fit their culture, that fit their values, that are going to fit their team. And, you know, a lot of that can come through in your hobbies or your interests. So if you are, you know, really into team sports, that obviously shows how well you work as part of a team, your communication, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, don't panic if you haven't included them. But I think that it can be useful to kind of show some personality for the people that you're applying for. So to go through a bit more detail, employment history. So this is a really, really important part of the CV. And the thing with health and safety is a lot of health and safety CVs tend to look very, very similar. And that's not a problem, but we want to make sure that they're looking similar because they're including the right information. You know, you're including the things that employers need to know in order to know whether to call you or to interview for this information. So what we suggest is to have it in a very, very clear setting where you have your job title first, and then on the other side of the page, equal to the job title, the dates that you were doing that job. And then underneath that, the name of the company and potentially what the company does. So if it's a company that is not particularly very well known, it's always really, really helpful to put alongside that, you know, X company, this is a global manufacturer or whatever it is. And again, that just really, really helps the people that are looking at your CV to identify the important stuff first off, so that they don't have to, search through it in detail. The idea with all of this is to make this information as clear and as obvious as possible to people that are looking over your CV. So yeah, each section of your employment history needs to have job title, dates of the employment, name of the employer, and, you know, potentially a little bit about what they do, and then the description of your job role. So in terms of describing the job role, like I said, they can be quite similar in health and safety because a lot of the duties are the same. If you are starting out in health and safety, you're obviously going to have different roles that aren't necessarily health and safety advisor, but there's going to be lots and lots of relevant stuff. So the idea here is to really look at what the employer is looking for. You know, you want to have a look at the job description, identify the key skills and the key duties of that position, and try and replicate that in what you are putting on your page. Now, obviously, only put it down if you actually do it. We don't want you to be writing down duties and things that you don't do at the moment. But for example, if you're applying for a role that talks a lot about risk assessment, and you know, you may not be a safety person at the moment, but you may have got involved in risk assessment, or you may have shadowed people in your current role, that's the sort of thing that we would put really, really clear and really prominent at the start of that job description, start of that job role description, sorry. So that, again, people that are looking at your CV, it's the first sort of thing that they see. In terms of what information we need about your employment, we need to know the day-to-day stuff that you do. So whether that is, risk assessments or safe systems of work or, toolbox talks or whatever it is, we need that information. But the other key thing is the achievements from that role. So what is it that kind of makes you stand out above and beyond the normal sort of day-to-day of the job description? So whether that's, you worked really closely, you were shadowing someone in a health and safety position and you worked with them on setting up a health and safety committee and you had some really good results from that, or anything like that that kind of makes you stand out. We want those in the description as well. And the key thing with employment history is to know what to leave out as much as what to put in. So, for example, we want to know everything that's relevant. So if you have got a career history going back sort of 20 years, that's great. But we don't necessarily need to know the sort of maybe shop work or something like that you were doing 20 years ago if it's not relevant to the position you're applying for. So I would think about including just the most recent and most relevant stuff. Again, yeah, something from 20, 30 years ago isn't always necessarily applicable to what you're applying for. So try and think about that kind of stuff as well. So when you are, looking to get into health and safety, or if you're looking to change careers or anything like that, it can be quite tough to emphasize those transferable skills that we know that you have. But again, because employers, they don't have that long to look at CVs, the idea is you've got to make those transferable skills really, really stick out, because you don't want the HR person or the recruiter or whoever it is to have to search through your CV to find that information. The reality is they don't have time to do that sort of searching and trying to read between the lines. You've got to make sure these transferable skills are really, really obvious. So think about anything that you've done that could be applicable, again, to those job duties. So whether that is being mentored by someone within the business that's in a safety role, or maybe you shadowed someone in a safety position and you got some good experience from that, make sure that is really, really obvious and at the front of kind of everything you talk about. Consider, any volunteer work. We often advise, if you are looking to get into the industry, volunteering is a great way to do it. Approach perhaps charitable organizations or anything like that. They're always looking for support. We recommend, going to these charities and maybe saying, look, I've got safety qualifications, I'm trying to get some experience. Can I come and volunteer for you and do a bit there? Anything like that, that we can add to the CV to show that you've got not just the qualifications, but you've got the understanding and you've got some of that hands-on experience. As we said, we want to really emphasize the points that are in the job description for the role that you're applying for. So again, if the job description is saying that the main duty is risk assessments and your CV doesn't mention risk assessments anywhere in it, the likelihood is they're not going to call you and they're not going to speak to you about this role. So you've got to try and find those crossover points. Whether that is through, like I said, volunteer work or through shadowing, or whether it's, because you work in the food industry, you work in retail and you've had experience of food safety through that, whatever that exposure is, you need to tie it into the job description and make it really, really clear within that employment history. So the focus is obviously on the safety applicable duties. So again, when you're writing that employment history and we're saying, we want to know the day-to-day duties that you've done, really what we want to know is the day-to-day duties that you've done that are applicable to safety roles. So it's great that you've potentially been in another position and you've got this other experience and know these other parts of your job that were really, really important, but they're not necessarily applicable for the role that you're applying for. So again, push all the safety applicable stuff right to the top of the employment history when you're writing about it, and you can include some of the other duties at the bottom. Again, just remember, all of this is about making the information jump off the page to the employer or to the recruiter or whoever it is that is reading that CV. And definitely mention any involvement with IOSH, because again, what people are looking for on these CVs, if particularly if you are someone new to the industry or someone trying to get in, trying to get into safety or to change careers into safety, we're looking that not only do you have the qualifications, but you have the understanding and you have the hands-on knowledge. And involvement with IOSH is a really, really great way to do that. So you could talk about branch meetings that you've been involved in. If you're involved in, say, the mentor scheme through IOSH, that's a great thing to mention as well. Particularly if you can get some sort of recommendations from your mentor or other people within IOSH to kind of back up what you're saying about yourself. All of that stuff will really, really go a long way in encouraging people to pick up the phone and call you about the position. So when it comes to the education and qualification side, as we mentioned earlier, we really want to focus on what is relevant. So very often I get CVs from people and, they've got all their employment history and then they've got 2 pages of qualifications at the end. And it's very admirable. It's great that you've done all these qualifications, but a lot of them just aren't applicable to a safety position. So again, what it means is that, myself or a HR person or whoever it is having to hunt through that education to find the information that's relevant to them. So focus on what's relevant, put the safety qualifications right at the top. So they're the first thing you see when you get to that education section. And you've got to make it obvious, again, really, really spell out how that education and how those qualifications are relevant to the role that you're applying for and relevant to the job requirements that you're applying for. So if they are, for example, looking for someone with a NEBOSH certificate and you've got a NEBOSH diploma, I would say put your NEBOSH diploma and then in brackets put something like, the level of NEBOSH certificate and NEBOSH diploma is this level, so that it's really, really clear to, again, the person reading it that your qualification is higher than the one they've asked for. And the reason we say this is because unless you are dealing with, a safety manager or a specific safety recruiter, traditionally when you apply for a job, your CV is going to be put in the hands of a HR professional and they may not understand safety. They may not understand the different qualification levels and the different routes that you can go with your education. So you've got to make it super, super obvious for them. And what you don't want to happen is you apply for a job and HR discount you because they say, oh, well, they haven't got an NEBOSH certificate, when you've got an NEBOSH diploma, which, is a higher level qualification. So yeah, make it super, super obvious. So you can go as far as saying, you're asking for a NEBOSH certificate, I've got a NEBOSH diploma, which is a higher level qualification. Just make it really, really clear to them. And yeah, make sure that safety stuff is first. It's great to talk about your other qualifications. And again, if they're relevant, things like leadership qualifications or project management, they can be quite relevant. But I see a lot of CVs that come through and they've got their, their school qualifications, their GCSEs or their A levels or whatever it is on there. And that doesn't really tell us anything about that person because it's not relevant to the role. So just think about what's relevant and make it really, really clear and really obvious. So this is an example here of how to put your qualification into your CV. So you want to have the title of the qualification first, really, really clear. So if you put it in bold, that's great, because the first thing I see there is, okay, this person has an MSc. Make it super, super obvious. Again, that's the motto of this, this session, make it obvious, make it clear. Underneath that, you've got where you studied it and what years you studied it. The years are important because it lets us know how recent that qualification is, how relevant it is, how up to date you are on your qualifications. And then, like we said, you want to make it really, really obvious about what this qualification means. So here we've got IOSH accredited, this is grad IOSH level. So again, really, really making it clear to someone that is reading that CV what level that qualification is and what that means in the safety world. And what's great here as well is we've included some bits about the modules. So obviously not necessarily as important if you're doing sort of NEBOSH certificate as we kind of know the content for that, but for these degrees and things like that, it's really, really good to put some of the modules down that you've studied to show us, again, kind of the areas of key skills that you've got and the things that make you stand out, the things that, make you really, really employable for someone. Tailoring your CV, I think, is the most important bit. So a lot of people don't do this, and I understand why, because it is really time consuming to tailor your CV. But if you are not doing this, you definitely are missing a trick, and it is going to hamper your job hunting. So what we mean by tailoring your CV is you should have a basic CV, that you kind of work off every time, but then every different role you apply for, you should look at that CV and think, is this selling myself in the best way for this particular job opportunity? And make sure that you are emphasizing as much as you can. So as we talked earlier about emphasizing things that are in the job description, that's tailoring your CV and making it relevant for the person you're applying for. So it is time consuming. We always say that searching for a job is basically a full-time job. It does take a while, but it's a really important step. And if you do this is a step that a lot of people aren't doing, and it's going to make you stand out, and it's going to push you above those other people and hopefully get you that call or that interview. So when you are applying for a job, you want to research the company first. And by researching the company, what you're doing is you're looking for those transferable areas. You're looking for those areas that you can tie into yourself. So you maybe want to find out what the company values are, and then you can tie those to, your personal statement or to your employment history. So like we said with the teamwork example, if you are into team sports and the company that you're applying for, their main value is teamwork and collaboration, then that really is something to emphasize on your CV, and make sure in your personal statement you're talking about the fact that you are a team player, and you're used to working in team situations. That's going to really, again, appeal to that person that's reading the CV, because they'll recognize it as one of their values and think, okay, that's someone that would fit in with us, that gets what we do and gets what we're about. And when you're researching the company as well, it will give you lots of information, more specifics about what they do. So you may know that they're manufacturing, for instance, but when you research them, you'll find out more about the type of production, the type of lines. It'll give you some idea of the type of risks. And again, you can just kind of tailor what you're writing to appeal to that company specifically. So when they look at it, they think, this is someone who understands us. This is someone that will fit with us instantly. And so therefore, this is someone I'm definitely going to call. Look at the job description and consider the essential and desirable criteria. Now, you don't have to hit every single one of the essential criteria. Obviously, that is the dream. But we do advise, even if you are missing a few of the essential points, it's still worth sometimes, putting your name forward and applying for things, because you never know, it could still be a good fit from a values perspective. They may have someone that hits every single essential criteria but just isn't a good team fit, and you might be a better team fit. So consider them, but still apply, even if you're not hitting them all. But again, make sure as much of those essential and desirable criteria are reflected in your CV as much as you possibly can. So again, if the essential criteria is having a NIBOSH qualification, you want to make sure it's super, super obvious that you've got a NIBOSH qualification equal or higher to what they're looking for. If the desirable criteria is someone with excellent communication skills, you want to put into your personal statement about your communication skills and why you have such great communication skills and what you've done with that. You could tailor your key achievements to be around your communication style. And all of that stuff, again, like we said, it's just making it super, super obvious that whoever is picking up that CV, that you are the person they should be calling. So yeah, look at the essential, the desirable, research the company, and then use that to refocus your personal statement. You want to then, when you've got your employment history, make sure that you're putting, again, all that relevant information first. So if the job description has got toolbox talks as the number one thing on the job description, that should be the number one thing on your job duties. So that, again, a HR person can easily look at the job description, look at your CV, and they just match up. Again, you just got to think about making it as obvious and as simple as possible for someone reading your CV to find that information. And like we said, unfortunately, that does take a lot of time. We really, really advise that you dedicate time to every application, because it does make a difference, and it's very, very noticeable when somebody has sent us a generic CV versus somebody who has researched the company and researched what they're looking for and has tried to give us that information. And traditionally, those are the people that are going to get called, that are going to get interviewed, and they're going to go to kind of to the top of the the pile, as it were. And then some common mistakes that we see. So overstating your skills and experience. So we've talked a lot, obviously, about tailoring your CV to the job that you're applying for and the company that you're applying for. But as I said, we don't want to lie. We don't want to inflate things. We don't want to talk about things that we potentially haven't done in as much depth as we are saying that we have. Because unfortunately, all that will happen is if you do get to that interview stage, the interview person is not going to match up to the CV person. So that sort of stuff does get found out. So don't overstate what you've done. We don't need you to lie. We just need you to show us the transferable areas. Again, if you have done risk assessments, but it's not the main part of your job, don't say, I spend majority of my time doing risk assessments, because that's not true. But do tell us about the risk assessments that you do. A really common mistake is just being too vague, and we understand why. We understand that you're passionate and you are looking for any opportunity, but unfortunately employers do kind of want to feel special, and they want to know that you're choosing to work with them. You want to work with them specifically. You don't just want any job, you don't care where it is and you don't care what industry it is. That doesn't really make them imagine a passionate person that will be dedicated to their company. And that's really what they're looking for. So again, try and avoid that being too vague. And this will come through if you tailor your CV. It won't be as vague anymore, because it is going to be tailored to that company's values and that company's culture and that company's experience. And again, that's just going to make them think, okay, this person has specifically chosen to apply to us, so they are genuinely interested in working with us. And this is a really big one at the moment, because it is a really difficult hiring market out there. And clients are really, really keen to make sure that they hire people that are going to stick around, that have got, longevity, that are going to be with them for a number of years. They don't want people that are just looking for any sort of job. So yeah, absolutely, don't be vague and tailor it as much as you can. We see embarrassing email addresses so often. We always recommend, if you are job hunting, set up a email just for your job hunting, so that you don't get anything else in there. You're not getting any spam, you're not getting any newsletters or anything like that. You have one inbox just for your job hunting, and your email address is ideally something really simple like your name, so that it's very, very clear who we're speaking to, who we're emailing. And it's helpful for you guys as well, because if you have just one inbox that is literally just for your job applications, it means you can find the responses really easy. If someone comes back to you, you're going to see it immediately, because there's no other spam or other information going into that inbox. So yeah, get rid of those old email addresses, that you may have been hanging on to for 20 years. Set one up specifically for your job hunt. Make it simple, make it clear, ideally your name or something similar. And have that inbox separate just for your jobs. And then a common mistake is about making your CV too long. So I get asked all the time about whether CVs need to only be 2 pages. And I don't agree that they only need to be 2 pages at all, but they should only include relevant information, as we kind of said earlier. So the mistake where people are sending us 10-page long CVs, it's not that the CV is 10 pages long, but it's that maybe 5 of those pages are information that I just don't need. So it's talking about jobs from 20 years ago, or jobs that aren't relevant to the role they're applying for, or like we said, it's a list of qualifications that aren't relevant to the role. That's when we look and think, okay, this person doesn't really know what they're applying for, and they don't know what information we need. So don't worry about keeping the CV to 2 pages. That's an old wives' tale. It's not true. But make sure that every single piece of information on that CV is relevant to what you're applying for. And if it's not relevant, take it out, then you don't need it. And then I think, Melissa, you were going to go through some country-specific considerations, weren't you?
Yes, thank you, Laura. That was really informative and insightful, and I think applicable regardless where you are in your career journey. So a lot of really useful tips. I wanted to just share a bit around country-specific considerations. I've been personally fortunate to have lived and worked in a couple of different countries. And I know, IOSH is a global membership. So of course, there'll be persons from different countries. So we just wanted to highlight a few differences and things to consider. So CV versus resume. Some countries, like the UK, And New Zealand, for example, don't really use the word resume, it's more CV. So, and whereas other countries, it may be more applicable to use the word resume. Photos. So this is an interesting one because I've come across some CVs that would have photos. Again, it varies a lot by country and culture. Some countries, again, like the UK, photos aren't looked at positively in terms of adding it on your CV or your resume. Whereas again, culturally, some other countries, it may be something that, you know, people have done in the past. Personal information, again, another interesting one. In UK and Europe, for example, because of things like GDPR, we don't want a lot of your personal information. But again, in some other countries in the world, a lot of that personal information is okay to be added. And I think, you know, the key message here is that, you know, really, you know, check the CV standards for the country you are job hunting in. You know, that piece of work and background and, you know, information gathering is really important. If you put the time in, you know, you're likely to be successful, as Laura has indicated. But we just wanted to provide some tips. We understand culturally there may be different expectations. So do a bit of research as you do that CV preparation and get those CVs out there. So now I want to hand over to Charlotte, who's going to talk a bit about IOSH accreditation.
That's great. Thanks, Melissa. So yes, we've had a lot of different conversations around some of the specifics of the CVs. And what I want to do now is look at one of the common questions that I get asked in relation to CVs, which is, if a job advert's listing that I need an IOSH membership level or a specific qualification, what does that actually mean? Why are some people asking for both? Why are some people asking for just the qualification or just the membership? So what I'm going to do is really quickly talk you through what those levels mean, and then we're going to hand back to Melissa to talk a bit more about what support we can offer at IOSH. So I've got an example here of a health and safety advisor advert that's being advertised at a company in London. And as you can see, the advert's asking for someone with an IOSH general certificate qualification or equivalent, and they're asking for tech level membership of IOSH as well as working towards that graduate member status. Now, a lot of the time, this might be the first time you're seeing these requirements. So I wanted to just give you a bit of context as to what this means if you see a job advert that asks something like this. So at IOSH, we are a not-for-profit charity organisation, and we have one of our duties is to define standards within the profession, and that includes telling people what we think a competent safety professional should have in the way of skills. So on the left, you can see our competency framework that outlines the key technical, core and behavioural skills that we think safety professionals should have. So many professionals pick up these skills through a combination of experience and qualifications. And for example, on the education front, we have universities and education providers all over the world that we accredit. Now, accreditation can mean different things in different countries, but we use it as a way of recognising qualifications as matching our competency framework. So what we do is we have a look at the qualification, we match it to the competency framework, and if it matches enough of the skills, then we accredit it. And then from there, people who finish those qualifications can go on to be IOSH members by fulfilling those academic requirements of the different membership grades. So when you do see membership mentioned in an advert, this is the levels that we're talking about. So if you see an advert asking for IOSH technical membership or a certificate equivalent, we're looking at level 3, and we use the European qualifications framework as our benchmark. Now, broadly speaking, these are things like certificates, university certificates, level 3 apprenticeships, and they are awarded by universities and awarding organisations. As you can see on the screen, here are some examples. However, if you see an advert asking for graduate membership or grad IOSH, or maybe they're asking for a bachelor's or a master's degree or a sort of higher level qualification, This means they're looking for someone who has done that higher level of study. So if you're on the call and you're wondering if your qualification that you're either doing or you have done or you're thinking about doing, if you're wondering if they're accredited, what you can do is you can scan the QR code on the screen. You can search by country and you can have a look at what qualifications we accredit, and we are accrediting more all the time. So feel free to have a look back at that list later on in the year. And I will leave that on the screen for a second, but if you are looking for it on our website, you can simply just put in the search box accreditation and it will bring it up for you. So finally then, if we revisit that example of the health and safety advisor advert, we now can tell that this employer wants someone who has got at least a level 3 qualification or equivalent. And they've listed NEBOSH, for example, as quite a popular and recognised example of that qualification. So you know that if you don't have that, you need to try and demonstrate that you have something equivalent, as Laura was talking about earlier. Now for technical membership, you now know that that kind of broadly relates to the qualification they've listed, but you can see that they've actually put that you want to work towards graduate member status. So they might want to hear from you if you're planning on doing any further study, maybe if you're already registered to do some further study like a diploma or a university degree. So that's something really good to mention when you're applying. So hopefully that helps you understand the levels a bit more. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass back to Melissa, who's going to tell you more about the support that's available for people who are job searching at IOSH.
Thanks, Charlotte. So yes, this is a good piece. And, again, speaking personally, I am an IOSH member. And so it's been a really great experience being able to access the various IOSH tools that's out there. So, okay. So anyone who is studying an IOSH accredited IOSH qualification can apply for student membership. And there's a lot of benefits to being a student member of IOSH. You have access to a lot of incredible networks. So, as I mentioned, as a member, I'm able to attend branch meetings, in person as well as virtually. You can have access to IOSH mentors. I've also had access to IOSH mentors who have made a really difference, in my career over the last couple of years. You have access to the online Career Hub. And the benefit here is that there's a one-time payment of £15. And there's also access to the student bursary with £250. If you want to find out more about student membership, if you're not already a member, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen there. IOSH Career Hub, another great feature. So here you can see there's lots of information around building your CV. It will have tips for the different aspects of your CV. There's also a career builder feature on the website, as you can see here. So building a great CV. So lots of tips. We got a lot from Laura. This will be a good refresher as well, and it walks you step by step the process of generating a CV. And then finally, the IOSH job page. So here, there's lots of the latest health and safety jobs that's available. You can see what's possible in terms of locations, different levels, different types of jobs. One of the great things about being an IOSH professional is the number of industries that we have access to. So again, you can scan this QR code if you're looking for information on what jobs are available via IOSH webpage. So great. I hope that was informative, and I'm sure there's lots of questions. We saw a few in the chat, and Charlotte is going to help facilitate this Q&A portion.
That's great. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Laura. There's some really useful insights in there. Some things I wish I would have known maybe a few years ago. So what I'll do now is I'll go over to the chat and I will just stop the share just so that we can see our speakers. And let's go to the Q&A. So someone has asked an interesting question, and I'm not sure there's an easy answer to this one, but what is the first position that you can get as a health and safety officer for example. So your first health and safety job, that's an interesting one. I'll hand it over to both of you.
Yeah, so it is an interesting one. There's no there's no set entryway into health and safety, but traditionally people start at the bottom and work their way through. So what we mean by that is going in as a coordinator or an assistant or something like that, and then moving their way up to officer, advisor, and then up through management. Now, if people have done high-level qualifications, there is an argument that someone at diploma level is probably capable of coming in at management level. But we do find, particularly in the UK, experience does speak for a lot. So traditionally, you're going to go in at that, officer or coordinator kind of level, and then work your way through.
That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Laura, for that. Yeah, I think you answered that really well, in that it does depend on the organization and the industry a bit in terms of the titles, but that frame around, starting at a certain level, and there's the broadening and upwards opportunities. But typical roles could be officer, coordinator, advisor, specialist, etc.
Definitely. And actually in one of our previous webinars on finding work experience, we talked about the value of using the correct search terms when you're looking for jobs. If you're too specific, you're not going to pull up any affiliated roles or roles that have just been called something different. Everyone's always looking to create the next exciting job title. So there are a multitude of jobs in safety, anything from a fire engineer to a wellbeing expert, and it's very good to not narrow your search too much by title, and maybe just look for those keywords, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the greatest profession, I think. It's such a breadth.
That's great. Okay, we have another question here. Someone has an environmental background, and they're asking if it's worth including a lot of that on the CV as well, since a lot of health and safety jobs include environmental elements such as ISO 14001. Or they say, should you only include that if the job is asking for specific experience? So they're looking to see if they can add more potential to their CV by mentioning that.
Yeah, the environment one is interesting because it is a big topic at the moment. We're seeing a huge push on the environmental and the sustainability side of things. I mean, again, if you're applying for a role and it's HSE or EHS, then absolutely, it goes straight in. If you're applying for a role and it's health and safety only, which to be honest is more rare now, we tend to see that they are more well-rounded. But if you're applying for a health and safety advisor position, I don't think it hurts to include the environmental stuff, because again, it's telling this employer, this is this extra stuff I've got that I can do for you. But again, what you want to do is make sure that the safety stuff is the first thing they say. Again, just think about making it relevant for them. So, they're not asking for the environmental qualifications. It's good that you have them, and it's definitely a bonus for people. But if that's the first thing they see when they open your CV, they're going to assume you only have environmental and not health and safety. So just again, tailor it for each job opportunity. If it's HSE, then yeah, put it in, it's useful. If it's just health and safety, make sure health and safety is prominent and first.
Yeah. Nothing to add to that. That's great. Again, it's tailoring your CV. That's a really valid point. From my personal experience, looking for at roles, you can't just use the same CV for all of the roles. You do have to spend some time and tailor it for the specific job.
Definitely. Great. Well, we've got another question saying that this person has been working for 3 to 4 years in occupational health and safety, and they're currently doing an MSc in the UK. And they're wondering if they should be adding their volunteer experience in the CV or just job experiences when job hunting, because they've not had any work experience yet in the UK in health and safety.
Yeah, so volunteer as well as work experience, all of it is really useful. Again, it's just building up this picture of you and what you can do, and your volunteer experience may be different to your work experience, so absolutely put it all in. If you are doing your MSc in the UK now, I would really advise try and do some volunteer work in the UK as well, just to get that kind of foot in the door. of that UK experience. And, you know, we talk about the charity aspect quite a lot with people, but for example, Oxfam, which is a big charity across the UK, are always looking for volunteer safety people. You know, they're really, really keen to get those sorts of people in. And particularly if you're doing an MSc, you've got a lot of skills that they would be very pleased to have. So yeah, include the volunteer, include the work as well, because it's probably got different angles. But yeah, I would encourage you to try and do some UK centric stuff if you can.
Yeah. Being a volunteer develops different skills. You're working with different people, and volunteering is different from in a team where someone's getting paid, and it's just a whole different skill set and experience that, you know, for me as a hiring manager, I will value someone who I see is balancing, you know, that work experience, qualifications, and also volunteering and giving back, because personally as a volunteer, I have learned so much in that as well, and I've grown some skills. So yes, totally add those on.
And volunteering shows passion, doesn't it, for the industry as well? It's showing that you genuinely care and you're really engaged. And again, that's the sort of people that we want to hire. We don't want someone that just kind of turns up and does the bare minimum. We want someone that genuinely cares and wants to make a difference. And volunteering is a great way to demonstrate that.
Exactly. The next thing that I will do is I'll very quickly take two questions we've got on student membership. One is about how long you can access it. You can access it as long as you're studying, and then we give you 3 months at the end of your qualification to transfer to a high level of membership. And someone's asked, is student IOSH membership worth including on my CV? And if so, how can I sell it to an employer as someone new to health and safety? Really briefly, I'll just add that membership of IOSH shows that you're consciously looking for development opportunities, you're looking for learning opportunities, whether it's by engaging with the member benefits like the Career Hub that have been mentioned, or the specialist research, but also that you're collaborating and that you're opening yourself up to the world of safety and health. So I think in isolation, if you just stick it on at the bottom, it might not, as Laura was mentioning earlier, it might not do very much for you. But actually, if you explain, it's like a gym membership. If you explain how active you are in your IOSH student membership or any membership level, it's bound to impress. What do you think, either of you? Anything to add?
Yeah, just completely agree. I would definitely include it, because again, particularly if you're looking at you know, changing careers or moving countries or anything like that, if we see that you're a student member of IOSH, that indicates to me some understanding of what IOSH is, some understanding of how it's relevant to your work and how important it kind of is within your career. So yeah, I would absolutely include it. And if you can explain, like, you know, like Charlotte was saying, some of the stuff that you do with it, whether that's, you know, being involved in these sorts of development sessions or whatever it is, again, it's just showing that passion, isn't it, and that engagement for the industry.
Exactly.
As a hiring manager, again, you know, it's something I've asked in some of my questions in terms of, you know, how are you staying connected with others, you know, getting involved, keeping up to date with regulations and things like that. And so I value membership to professional associations. So yes, even as a student member, it's showing that you value that piece as well as getting the work experience, because it ties in really well. Everyone in my team are a member of at least one of, you know, the professional associations.
Definitely. And actually, we've had a question in the chat around someone looking for a role in occupational health specifically. And one thing I'd really advise is, if you're looking for an affiliated role like that, then definitely check out professional associations that are active in that area, but also reach out to networks at IOSH that might be talking about occupational health. And actually, we have different industry groups that cover different areas, one of which is health and social care, and they recently did a get to know health and social care video. It's available on YouTube, and you can learn a bit more about OSH in that particular industry. So another question we've got is, how competent should employers expect you to be if you have academic qualifications but not as much experience? That is an interesting question.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. I think that is sometimes the challenge, you know, when you are job hunting. This is why we talk about, working your way up, because sometimes there is an expectation that because you are at diploma level, because you have an MSc, that you should be going in at management level. And the truth is that employers do want some experience. So I would expect to go in at an assistant or a coordinator level and work your way through. Employers are quite open at that bottom level and that entry level to people. They understand that you don't have experience, and they're quite open with that, because at that level you aren't necessarily in charge of anything. You're doing hands-on stuff, and you're doing day-to-day stuff and supporting the management, supporting the strategy, rather than setting it or anything like that. So particularly after COVID as well, and because it is quite a difficult hiring period at the moment, we found clients are really, really open to taking people that don't have experience, but you should expect to be coming in at a more junior level.
Yeah, I think that's a really good response. We've got someone asking about they're living in Turkey and they've got experience in health and safety. And the question is about working abroad as a health and safety officer or management. So I guess the question there is around, again, that moving into a different country to work, having had experience of a different country, which I think is quite common. We've got a lot of people that move around a lot globally, especially consultancy. So I wondered if either of you have got a response to that question or any tips.
I can jump in there. So I live in the UK, but I'm actually from Trinidad, and I have worked in the US, so it is possible. And actually, as you know, I keep saying I'm a hiring manager. I'm actively looking for people to join my team. And a lot of the applications we've gotten have been persons who have had mostly experience outside of the UK. And for me, it's, again, you talked about transferable skills, right? And, from a health and safety perspective, is the work activities that you've done, how does that match with what we need on our sites, right? So I see that as transferable. One of the things is around understanding the local regulations, because there will be some additional or specific pieces for the UK. So if you're interested in working in the UK and, have the experience from outside, please talk about that, speak to the things that you have delivered in the space around making sure people are healthy, safe, and well, but also make sure you underpin that with understanding of the local regulations. And that's why things like IOSH membership and following the webinars, there's always some branch that has a legal update at least once a year. We've done it in Chiltern. So that's a good way to keep up to date with, the specific UK regulations. So just coming from someone who's been international experience, it is possible. You just have to make sure that you speak to how your experience translates to that company or the industry, etc.
Definitely. Now, we've had a lot of questions come in, and I think we've probably got time for one more before we hand over to the conclusion of the session. And we've generally had people ask around differences between different qualifications, and also the likelihood of certain qualifications getting them or landing them particular jobs. For example, someone's asked the difference between an IOSH diploma and an NVQ level 6. And I think it's really interesting that when it comes to education, at IOSH, we recognise that there are a lot of different educational needs in the world. There are lots of different communities that require local qualifications to kind of deliver different things, different needs, hence why accreditation exists. And just like everyone has their own learning style, there is a qualification to match your preference, whether you're someone that wants to go the academic route, whether you're someone wants to do a more vocational route like an NVQ, whether you're someone who wants to sit exams or not sit exams. So I think rather than focusing in really hard on one qualification versus another, or I'm not getting a job because I've got 15 of these qualifications, really try and hone in on what information you want to learn, what skills you want to pick up, and how you want to learn them. And if you ever need any advice, you can get in contact with IOSH or the particular qualification provider and detail your needs and ask how the qualification works, because it's important that you know what you're getting yourself into. So I don't know if either of you have got anything to add on the qualification front.
Yeah, completely agree with that about finding the qualification that suits your learning style. From a from a recruitment or hiring perspective, It shouldn't be a barrier to you which qualification route you go. The only time it's a barrier is if you are, like I said, applying to a company that is, you know, your CV is going straight into the hands of HR rather than to a safety manager or, you know, a safety recruiter. Sometimes they just don't understand the different qualifications, and they don't understand how they're equivalent. So like we said, it's just about making it really obvious so that, you know, if you send your CV through and you've got an NVQ and they're asking for an IOSH diploma, making it just super obvious to whoever reads that CV that it's the same level, that it's, you know, equivalent qualification, that it's you know, it would be accredited at the same level by IOSH. Because otherwise, if you don't and you just put NVQ, what might happen is a HR manager could look and go, oh, okay, they haven't got an IOSH, and just move on. So it isn't a barrier in terms of they won't not hire you if you've got a different route. You just need them to understand what route.
That's great.
The only thing I was going to add, because I saw it in the chat, it's less about the qualifications, but like the professional membership and so on. Someone asked about it being applicable in the US. So I am a member of ASSP as well, and I have my CSP. And every 5 years we have to get recertification effectively. And I put in my IOSH membership and, you know, the things I've been doing from an IOSH perspective. So one of the great things I like, again, global connectivity between these professional associations. There is that recognition of it. So it is transferable in certain aspects. And as I said, I've used it personally, but you know, it goes back to what Laura says from a CV perspective. You do have to spend some time and do the work and document that, show how it is transferable, show how it is related. And, you know, you get that foot in the door, and then in the interviews, you know, just speak more about that. I think that's where it's really important. But of course, the CV is your access into the interview room.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for that. I thought that was a really good Q&A. What I'll do now is I'll hand back over to Melissa to close the session.
Okay. Thank you, Charlotte, and Laura, and hopefully this has been very useful for the attendees. And, you know, a couple of call for action for all of you all on the call. So do watch the previous employability webinars. Again, you can scan that QR code. There were 2 other sessions that had been held over the last month or 2. Again, we talked about IOSH membership. If you're not a member, we highly recommend you joining IOSH. There's a lot of benefit. We talked through a few of those in terms of access to the tools, resources that's available. So again, scan the QR code and follow us on this different social media. There's loads of them, you know, choose the ones that you prefer. I am personally a LinkedIn person versus Twitter and TikTok, but I know TikTok isn't here, but yeah, so there's loads of options to keep updated with what's going on with IOSH. And lastly, there is an upcoming webinar session. So the 4th in the series, and it will be speaking around your continuing professional development and how you can identify your skill gaps and develop your plans to close those gaps and continue to enhance your career development. So that will be on September 1st, as you can see there. So do look out for the registration link, and we hope to see you all there. And with that, I just want to say thanks again. And, you know, Charlotte had mentioned a couple of resources and email addresses if you have any questions around membership. But also there is this email address here, careerhub@iosh.com, for further information. So again, there's an opportunity for you to provide feedback. Hopefully you're seeing that on the screen. Feedback is so important for continuous improvement. So do spend a few minutes or 2 to give us some feedback on this webinar. Again, on behalf of IOSH, I want to thank Charlotte and Laura for such a great session. So thank you, and everyone, stay well and have a great day.